What is going on, everybody? Welcome to week 6 of Look Who's Chalking. I would like to do a smiley intro where we're talking about all sorts of great things, but I'm just going to get it out of the way. First, I'll say hello to Gary for 2 seconds, like kind of when you got something on your mind and someone comes up to you at like a wedding and then you just hello, hello. So hello, Gary. Hello.
Hello, Andy.
Now you can come back over here. And I would just like to let you know, every once in a while, you haven't really heard a lot about this season, but I guess with the temperatures, remember, people blaming like, oh, well, the temperatures are changing. That's what's no, it's not. That's not why you're sick. You're not sick because the temperatures are changing. I'm pretty sure our bodies figured that in through the millennia. Anyway, I'm sick because it was the first true swing and miss on Devontae versus AJ. And I can't even say it was an AJ. This is like I went on a roulette wheel when you get a 0-0. It was, Dallas got her. You got to play again. But I was truly wrong about that. The only good thing is that between him and Jalen Waddle, I get to roll that over. So any way they both may have screwed me last week, and I know Waddle had a touchdown, but Devontae Smith especially, the one time I really put it out there. I've been right about those bastards since week 1 of 2000, let alone, this year. and just to get like the full borderline donut performance, like the one catch, and it even showed him standing depressed on the sideline with the coach Sirianni. He was just like, and Sirianni had to give him the "it's gonna be all right, pal" tap on the back. There was a sideline shot of that when the announcers were talking about him having a slow day. It was very depressing. So when it comes to Devontae Smith, I'm sick, and that's really all I have to say.
I get you, man. We kind of swung a miss on both of our Men's Warehouse for the first time all season. For Michael Pittman, for me, I mean, I didn't anticipate Anthony Richardson going down, but it shouldn't matter really with Gardner Minshew. Honestly, you can make an argument that Minshew is just as good for Pittman as Richardson is. So, wasn't our best week, but I think we've built up enough equity with the audience to this point to give us another shot here. Because
is that a millionaire trio, by the way? Pittman, Waddle, and Smith?
Yeah, seriously.
Everyone disgusted with them, and then going to those 3 guys this week.
It's certainly possible. I know, and I felt bad for you when I saw Devonta Smith's box score, because Devonta Smith was born in 1998, and as you said, since 2000, you've been right about when it's Devonta Smith or AJ Brown. He was 2, and I know you're like the guy in Lost that's traveling through time, meeting babies when they're kids, and you're 100%. Like, you're going to be special one. I know. Weeks 5, 2023.
I've done that with your kid. I'm just not going to reveal the stats to you because, like Doc Brown told us all, you can't be altering the timelines like that. You can't let people know about what's going to happen to Marty McFly Jr. in the future.
Right.
This week, I sent something along to our Joe Blow public. He texts us in somewhat of a bragging fashion. So he doesn't make a lineup for us, but then he does that thing where it's like, oh, guys, I think I'm out of this. And then he sends us a winning lineup. He goes, look at me this week. Who'da thunk it? You want to know who'da thunk it? Everybody, because this was the second chalkiest week of all time. The second chalkiest lineup ever won the millionaire. And it makes, it doesn't surprise us at all that Joe Blow public has himself a nice week.
Yeah, I mean, Breece Hall, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, all guys that were getting like 20+% owned, and all guys that were optimal. That's gonna, swing things in a big way when that happens. I was a week off on Jamar Chase, man. Oh, that was 55.5 points or whatever. Really good to see at least that he's back in the mix. And, I have Dolphins takes for this week too with Tyreek. He seems to be on the every other week plan. So he's coming off his 30+ point game. So I think we're getting like a 14-pointer this week, despite the good matchup. So, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, how about that with that game? You got Devon A-Chain going on the IR. Is that going to present an opportunity for Raheem Mostert to get the majority of the touches and also be a good play where people people are just mentally checked out of Mostert because they got into hardcore A-chain mode? Did they really want to go back to Mostert, go back to the 31-year-old? It just seems like maybe that's, I don't know. I feel like once people are out on someone, when people are in on someone, we were just talking about Kenneth Chalker III. I feel like people fell in love with him and they're still in love with him. But once they're out of love with him, that's going to be it. But it's been chalk fest since week 1 with him. What do you think about Mostert this weekend?
Yeah, well, I think it's worthy of having a conversation about running back in general here, because we have Christian McCaffrey at 9,500, and then you take a huge leap down to David Montgomery at 7,300 as your next most expensive back. So you have a $2,200 difference, and then you just have a hodgepodge of guys that project well between like 6K and 7,300, and the guys that project
Where do
really
you
well
think
are
that term came from?
hodgepodge.
If you had to guess, I've been doing this thing lately. You have to guess where the term came from. Sometimes, man, I could, all right, well, like, for example, pipe dreams. What the hell's a pipe? Oh, somebody was smoking a pipe. There was something in there, and you can call hodgepodge. I don't even know where to start.
I'm trying to think. Hodge, Hodge, Merrill
Hodgepodge.
Hodge.
I'm going with some English, some old, a hodgepodge. That can't be. I don't want to hear that. That's Dutch. Okay, that's an English. Yeah, look this up.
I'm
Origin
looking it up.
of hodgepodge.
Origin of hodgepodge. Let's see.
I think that's going to be maybe this week's
The
episode. A hodgepodge of.
The word derives from Anglo-Norman and Middle French hochepot, a dish containing a mixture of many ingredients, especially a kind of stew made from minced beef or goose and various vegetables.
You know what? It does sound a little stewish. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm a little upset that I didn't think there was some sort of just perpetual stirring going on somewhere. A bunch of ingredients in there. All right. Well,
let me tell you this. So what I was getting at is this range between 61 and 72, 7,300 is a chalk podge. It's a chalk podge. Everyone that projects well is going to be chalky here. I'm talking Joe Mixon, he's 6,300. I'm talking Raheem Mostert, he's 6,400. I'm talking Kieran Williams, he's 6,500. I'm talking Alvin Kamara, he's 6,800. I'm talking Josh Jacobs, he's 7K. I'm talking Travis Etienne, he's 7,1. All those guys I just mentioned, between 20 and 25% ownership. So the whole field's playing those guys, which makes sense. You need, they're cheap enough that they give you the flexibility and malleability throughout your lineups constructors. They're projecting as negligible differences between all these running backs in this range, and you need the raw points at running back, as we know every week, right? Like even in my Millie lineup, Derrick Henry was not optimal at his 8K or whatever, but he had 21 points. You need that, to win DraftKings lineups at the running back position. So all these guys look great.
And really, what you're going to need to do, man? This is unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen, but there is a hodgepodge or chalk podge of running backs, and you're not going to be able to guarantee which one is going to. It's like it's just one of those old grab bags drawing the sticks. You better hope you have the right two, because you're looking at these ETNs, Kamaras. I'm a huge fan. I see that Chalkeroach down there in a matchup like that. Eagles was never going to be a great matchup, but in a matchup against Arizona, someone like him could have one of his 30 touch days with 5 catches, a touchdown, and everything in there. Yep. Chalker against Cincinnati, Kamara getting a ton of work indoors against Houston. Jacobs finally starting to get all those touches against the New England defense that's been awful and laughable. Awful. Wow. Running into things. ETN getting a ton of work. Damn.
The pivots are.
And we're not even going to keep going down. Can we scroll down a little bit? Say that again, Gary.
Chalker's actually a pivot. He's coming through with no ownership compared to the rest of this group. So if you're looking for pivots, Chalker the third is a pivot. Jonathan Taylor, if you got balls, is a pivot. So is Zach Moss for that matter. Breece Hall in a tough matchup with the Eagles is a pivot this week. Alexander Madison's a pivot. Rashad White. So that 5K tier is actually a pivot. The pivots. So Damian Pierce, Jerome Ford, Ramondre Stevenson, Rashad White, Alexander Madison. No one's going to those guys. Even Brian Robinson. No one's playing those dudes. It's that 6K, 7K tier that everyone's going to play.
Can we click on Rashad White for a second out of curiosity? I know he's getting almost all the work. And in my opinion, you just need the right matchups. Like, and I mean,
Yep.
very right matchups. If I even see a remotely good defense, I would be out on him. So, like New Orleans, I wouldn't have played him. Philly, I wouldn't have played him. Chicago, I would have played him. And yeah, that's his only good game that I'm seeing right there. Detroit
Yep.
against running backs. The defense has been pretty good this year. I don't
Yeah, they've
know.
been pretty good.
That's tricky.
Yeah, I think
Coming off a
it's just
bye.
I mean, he could catch 6-7 balls, but I honestly I prefer Madison. I think even with Cam Akers eating into that role, just at the same similar price.
I don't even want to get
But
into it because it's I feel like it's too early in the show. But if you can X this out, I'm gonna be doing this. I'm gonna be playing New England's defense with Ramondre Stevenson. I'm calling his first very productive game against, I like saying Oakland still, but the Raiders.
yeah,
This is the opportunity that's going to present itself. Just keeping the ball out of Mac Jones's hands, and this is a game where they could stick to the run. I feel like they're going to get Garoppolo a few times. I know their D has been absolutely awful, but I think this is a matchup that will be good for them. And I weirdly think, I mean, Jesus, I wouldn't even have thought he got that many carries in previous weeks, excluding last week because they got down by a ton. I'm expecting something from Stevenson, and that is one heck of a call when you consider he's coming off
yeah.
3 straight single-digit declining performances, a 2.4 last game. Wow. That's awful.
Yeah, I mean, 68-3 the last 2 weeks for the Patriots. They've just been so bad. And you look at the screen there, if you're watching on YouTube, the efficiency has just been garbage on Ramondre. Probably the biggest disappointment of anyone that had a second round ADP right now. I agree, especially now that he's down to 5,400. Like, I'll keep taking shots there, but it's a large field tournament play. Like, even in the 3 max stuff, I wouldn't play him. I don't think personally. I just think the risk is too high. There's so many running back plays. But I agree. Like, all these guys are pivots.
Random question for people out there. When you say, okay, you don't want to use him in cash, that's understandable. Use him in big field tournaments, but not the power sweep, not the 3 max entries. So I guess what your advice would be the smaller the amount of entry. If it's not max entry tournaments, you can lean a little bit towards the safer plays.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, you have more wiggle room to be wrong in a 3 max or a single entry or a smaller field. And especially, like, I think this is true. Like, you don't want to be playing a pure cash lineup in those kind of lineups because that's not the way we're still looking for a ceiling to win a tournament. But you can take more shots with punt tight ends and things like that because there are times where you just need the raw points if you hit the nuts around everything else, where in the large field tournaments, you need pure nuts at every position, right? In these, you could go, okay, I have a floor, and then I have the nuts around everything else. So I don't mind taking shots on, guys that are more punty with a floor in the small field. But I also don't mind eating chalk as much in the small field. Where
Pure
large
Nuts
field
is also a great episode name.
Yeah, pure nuts. Yeah,
Pure Nuts.
But yeah, hopefully that made sense. But yeah, running backs. I think getting running back right this week is. I mean, this isn't some grand statement, but it's critical because, like as you said, somebody that's chalk is going to be good chalk. So parsing that through. I mean, do you want to play a game of good chalk, bad chalk real quick with these guys?
I do.
So here, I'll go from what I'm projecting to be the highest. So I got Joe Mixon at 26.4% at 6,300 against Seattle. He hasn't shown me any ceiling so far this year.
I'm going bad chalk. Ever since I brought that up to you last year, he's had one good game, and it happened to be that week because this world fucking likes to look at me and say F you. He had a 4-touchdown game after I said he looks like garbage. He's been garbage ever since that episode, except for that weekend after that episode.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. They Devontae Smith me that day, and they did it to me again this past week. But that's bad chalk. Next.
I agree.
Remember that show on MTV?
I agree with that chalk.
That show on MTV where a person is on a date with you and you're talking and it's like, yeah, so, I went to college here. It was second year. We really got it. And someone just goes next in the middle of right in your face. And then you get caned off stage like the WB Frog and they wheel somebody else in and then you just start the date over. What a preposterous show idea. only to be upstaged by room raiders, where apparently an MTV crew and some girl who's potentially interested in you busts in your front door like the FBI, goes to your room, and wants to see if they can find what is implied as semen just everywhere. They take a black light, put it on everything. You could have just drooled a little. The orange juice from your breakfast in bed could be there. They're immediately insinuating that that's semen. Anyway, going on to the next good chalk, bad chalk.
The MTV 2000s shows, I remember all of those. They were absurd, like insane that was what we were watching. First of all, let alone that they were being made, but I was watching them.
Yeah,
It was like after school, I would just throw that on. Like, why?
Yeah, 4:30.
So why am I watching this? Josh Jacobs is the next guy. It's 26%, very similar to Joe Mixon. I'm with you, by the way, on bad chalk for Mixon. Jacobs, I'm just going to keep buying into this role. It's so concentrated. You mentioned how bad the Patriots have been in general. We haven't gotten an efficiency game yet from Jacobs. As you can see on your screen there, it hasn't even been over 3.5 yards a carry, but we've had that five. We had 5 catches last week.
He's one of 2 running backs, and I'm sorry to cut you off like that.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm trying to, it's weird when you do, if this was in person, it's different. When you're doing like, live on streams, you have to just give people a semi cutoff. I'm not trying to be a prick.
Yeah.
But I saw earlier that him and Dalvin Cook are the only 2 running backs in the NFL that have gone under on their rushing total every single week since week 1.
Wow.
That's pretty incredible.
Yet I still think Josh Jacobs has talent, and I think Dalvin Cook is cooked. So I think he's Dalvin cooked. So I think Jacobs is fine chalk. I wouldn't call it good. I wouldn't call it bad. I think it's fine.
I would call that mediocre chalk. Yeah, mediocre chalk.
Kamara is the next guy. I think it's good chalk, man. The role is
and I also
so
want to say I still am befuddled from the week 1 and 2 passing game usage from Jamal Williams. I remember after week 2, I said, you know what, Gary? I maybe they're making Carr go through his progressions. No, not at all. I don't want to hear anything about a clavicle injury or some. No, and that's why he's just right back to the Carr that we always remember. I'm just shocked that week 1 Jamal Williams didn't have 9 catches. I just want to say that once again, because here comes Kamara with his 16 catches in 2 weeks, 1 reception touchdown. Is that a receiving touchdown last week, or is that just a regular one? No, that's just a regular rushing touchdown.
Regular, yep.
But when you got Carr out there in a game that is going to be winnable, it's against Houston, it's indoors. The only thing that stinks about Kamara these days is he's not really capable of those 30, 40-yard runs that we used to see from him. He seems to be going down around the line of scrimmage a lot these last 2 years. And I know it looks like he averaged, he averaged 3.6 last game. They did give him 22 attempts. Holy moly.
Dude, the role is great. I mean, they ran the ball 40 times because they were so in control of this game. So Kendrick Miller even ended up having 12 carries, but the role is incredible for Kamara, and now you get a Houston team that we've been able to run on for years. This seems really, really good to me. I think for cash, he's probably the guy I'd be looking to if you're a cash player. And I don't. He'd be one of the chalk pieces that I'd be comfortable leaning into, personally.
Okay.
Next guy's the Chalkaroach. So I'll give it to you because I know you kind of just did the breakdown on him. He's 23% right now.
The Chalkaroach to me is Alvin Kamara, but in a little bit better of an offense, weirdly enough, where Stafford can spread it around. The only argument you can make with Cooper Kupp being reintroduced into the lineup, that's going to potentially take a couple of those targets away from him. My counter to that would be, that's what you saw against the Eagles. I do feel like in this matchup, you will see 4 to 5 catches from him because they won't have to get the ball out of Matthew Stafford's hands immediately. They're not going to have a defensive line breathing down their neck like that, which also means he'll be a little more likely to score a touchdown. I just like this matchup a little bit better. I know Houston is not a terrifying matchup and it's a good situation. Maybe I'm just a Chalkaroach guy, but I really like what I've seen from him. They ceded 1 carry to Ronnie Rivers last week. So whatever you think about Kamara, if The Rams are up 3 touchdowns. They're not yanking him out of the game like they did Kamara late in it. You're getting Chalkpodge all day, all night. After a mediocre week, I think he's going to be a very good play this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good chalk too. All right, 2 more names here over 20%. So Travis Etienne, 22.7%. Every guy we've named so far, Mixon, Jacobs, Kamara, Kieran Williams, have not been efficient. That is not the same for Etienne, especially coming off last week where he was surprisingly gashing the Bills, 5.2 yards a carry. The role, talk about a great role right now, is absolutely excellent here. He's a little bit pricier.
Jet lag is a real thing.
Jet lag's a real thing. I think there's a chance he gets super steamed up because of how good he was last week. So I think the field might go there. But the reason that I'm only going to call it okay chalk instead of great chalk is because I think the pivots at the 7K tier are more interesting than the pivots in the 6K tier, meaning David Montgomery, 12%, Bijan Robinson, 13%. That's not a lot compared to these guys that are all in the 20%. Bijan, 13% at 7,200. Like no one, that's low for this week with running back. So if you're looking for pivots around him, I think they're better. But I can't poke that many holes in ETN at home here. He also has a receiving role this year. I mean, he's been around 3 to 5 targets every single week.
Yeah, they don't seem to like the kid that they drafted that much yet for whatever reason. And I think I told you before the year started, ETN is a young player. He's essentially a rookie entering his second year. They really liked what they saw last year because he was injured the entire previous year. And you would expect a running back who had a good year in his first full year coming off of an injury and now in his second year to look a little bit better and be a little bit better. And that's exactly what he's been. I think people maybe were too low on him before the season started.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right too. And then the last name here is Mostert, who is getting through 22% right now, 6,400. Too cheap, honestly. I have 0 holes to poke in this one.
Huh? Damn.
Yeah, I have 0 holes to poke in it, though. I think he's a great play. But the only thing I would say is I don't know who's going to be behind him. Is it going to be Jeff Wilson this week? Is it going to be Ahmed or Chris Brooks? Like, I want to know who the RB2 is because I want to sprinkle in that guy also.
I will tell you, and I'll guarantee you, Men's Warehouse style, if he's active, it's going to be Jeff Wilson. If you look at the games that they played together last year, Jeff Wilson got more work than Mostert. They love the guy. They traded for him, and I'll guarantee you they will never put him behind Salvador Ahmed as a number 3 if he's active and healthy. Because if he's not, then just you would hold him out another week. But if he's active and he's playing, I just don't think they make him active, and you're just seeing him sitting on the sideline all game. Oh, they'll let Ahmed sit on that sideline for years at a time, just like they have already. I don't think they're going to do that with Jeff Wilson. Either he's inactive or he's getting that next chunk of the work.
All right, I guess we're going position by position here because that's just how we're doing it, and that's fine. Let's just talk CMC before we go to receivers.
Because I think that running back thing you said is important to figure out this week.
I think it's great, but CMC is 9.5, so I told you, tier of his own. No one's going to play him because he's only 6% right now. You get a tough matchup going into Cleveland, but he's also a guy with a ceiling all to his own, right? So how do you handle him this week?
I don't worry about tough matchups if that team is just going to have to give up in the second half, which is what they had to do against the Ravens. So when you have a team that's been on the field all game long, now imagine Dallas last game, for example, but as you saw, they know they don't want to go wild with him. If you do think San Fran's going to throw an absolute beating, you're going to be getting that entire fourth quarter to Jordan Mason. So I know earlier in the year, week 1, Pittsburgh, they kept him out there, multiple touchdowns. They obviously are more aware this time around. And I saw that Elijah Mitchell practice yesterday. And if he's returning in the game, if you think it's going to be an absolute beating, you just have to be worried that the Niners have Super Bowl aspirations, and you're not going to see them run him out there like I believe that they'll run the Chalkpodge out there in the fourth quarter if they are up 3 touchdowns.
I do agree. I think if I'm spending at skill position this week, I'd prefer to be at receiver.
I smell 20 something points from him. I don't smell one of those 38-point performances.
So many good running plays that we just spoke about. So I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Should we touch on quarterback real quick? Because we didn't really do that. We could tie it into the receiver conversation. All right. So I guess let's start at the top. It's Jalen Hurts at 8,200, but he gets the Jets. I don't think anyone's going to really play him. He's 5.7% ownership right now. The Jets have been able to be beat on the ground way more than the air, but Hurts always has that upside for the
why didn't we bring up Swift?
Yeah, Swift's in play. Swift's a pivot too because he's 6,100. He's going to be under 10% owned. So Swift's in play for sure.
When I think about the
Yeah,
Jets, I think about Pacheco.
Yeah, Jaleel
And like other
McLaughlin
running
last week.
backs.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's
I
all
don't hate
right.
that
So
at
keep
all.
that in the back of your
And
head too.
look at Swift's box score, man. Swift, since he got that role in week 2, which obviously that was the explosion, but he's been so consistently right around 18 points. And we know that the upside's higher there because all it takes is one failed push, and then Swift gets the carry instead. And that those 17, 18 points is going to 24 real quick, right? So I don't mind Swift at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nah, sorry
But
for that little
Hurts, I mean,
detour
if you go to
back.
Hurts, you go to Hurts against the Jets. I probably don't really, even though he's not going to be that owned. Like there's a bunch of quarterbacks right underneath him that I prefer. I think.
Yeah, those
This
games
is
in New
it's like a
York,
stuff
I
matchup.
just think it's hard to hit that ceiling when he's truly playing his
Yeah.
best and getting, a ton of like last week was perfect. He got a ton of rushing, throwing, couple passing touchdowns. Rams are a great opponent for that. I mean, if you look at their point totals, 25, 34, 25, 34, 23, pretty consistent. Jets probably aren't the best matchup to do that against, so.
Yeah, I mean they're projected for 24 implied points. They're 7-point favorites and a 41 over under. It's just not the best environment for me. He's fine.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think we talk about our 3 power sleep quarterbacks. I don't think he'd be one for me this week, but he'd be in my tournament pool for sure.
That next guy's going to be one for me in Tua.
Yeah, and he's not going to be that owned again because again, pricing gets tight. He's 7,600. They get to these environments, especially with these 14-point favorites, where they just kind of run it out, and that's what we saw last week. Like he was well on his way to a 30+ point game, and then they get up by 3 scores on the Giants, and then they just run out the clock, and he ends up with 22. So that's your downside risk on Tua. Your upside risk is you look at week 3 and they put up 70 points, or you somehow get it back and forth. Now, I don't think Carolina's going to push, but I do think that they're going to have plenty of success scoring on this team. So the question really is how quickly can he get to like 25, 30 points you need before they run out the clock. I think he's.
I won't say that they necessarily ran out the clock. He threw a pick 6 and then almost threw another pick. He struggled in the second half of that game. They tried, and he just wasn't. He wasn't very successful in the second half of that game. Uncharacteristic. I forget the issues with their offensive line. They might be missing one of their linemen. But when you think about the second half of that Buffalo game, he was getting engulfed. And then the Giants, who are awful, they were able to get through to him a little bit. I mean, this is a defense that couldn't do anything. I believe they were dead last in the NFL in QB pressures. And the fact that they got a pick 6
and first in blitz rate, which is hilarious. I mean, I lean into this kind of stuff all the time. 30.5 implied team total, 13.5 point spread, 47.5 over under. I always say you're scoring those amount of points, you're beating that spread, you're scoring through the air. So I'm with you on Tua. Tua is a great play. And then you take a big jump down, right? You got Fields there too. I mean, and you can't ignore Fields, right? You can't ignore Fields after what he's done now for 2 weeks in a row. We're right back to those low to mid 30s, and Minnesota's been no issues playing against them. They're at home. So Fields seems really good to me again here. And now Minnesota might start reeling, right? No Justin Jefferson. They're 1-5 or whatever. I think they want to be tanking sooner than later, I would imagine. It's time for them to turn the page.
Any chance that messes with Minnesota's ability to go and get in these back and forth games, and all of a sudden a team like Chicago's up 10 and they run more, and they're not really
it's possible
run and gun out there?
I mean, Vegas is hedging for that scenario. Basically, it's 43.5 over under. So it's not like a crazy 38, but it's also not 47, right? 48. So they're calling a 3-point game. I'll say this. I wouldn't love playing Kirk Cousins at only $200 cheaper than Justin Fields without Justin Jefferson now, right? I think Osborne and Addison and Hawkinson, these guys are all good plays, but I don't really want to play Kirk at over 7K. So that kind of covers that conversation for both these guys. I'd rather play Fields if I'm playing this game.
Correct.
For sure. So, going down from there, any of these guys you like? We got Lawrence at 65 against Indianapolis. Goff's on the road. I like Goff at home. You got Burrow still way underpriced at 63. Stafford at 61. Like all these guys are in play besides Goff to me.
I mean, Stafford with cutback is very interesting because he's got his 2 target monsters again who can get open, and it seems like they got themselves an offense now. They got a little wiggler in between with Tutu Atwell, and then they got Higbee playing tight end. That's a cast there with the Chalkpodge in the backfield who can get some receptions as well. The
words you're saying right now are just They got a wiggler in the middle with Tutu. It's just like I don't know
Yeah,
why it makes
because
me
it's
laugh with the
self-explanatory.
chalker.
He's a skinny little guy running these
Yeah,
quick routes. I call those wigglers. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah. You
not.
gotta.
It's weird. A wiggler has a little more downfield ability than like a Julian Edelman or something, like a true slot guy. They're those wigglers.
Then a
You know, they
spark
can
plug. Those are
yeah,
spark plugs, right?
a little bit of
Or
both. But
yeah,
it's a good cast for Stafford, I think, and because they
yeah.
don't have a
Stafford's
running back. As much as I love the Chalker-Roach, he's not Todd Gurley, where it's like, you know what? Let's ride this guy to the win today. 200 yards and that's just not who he is. So if this is a matchup where they're going to be putting up points, it's coming through Stafford. But I do understand nowadays when it comes to these statuesque quarterbacks, I mean, you need 304 touchdowns. But the good news is I think that's there's a possibility.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So Stafford, Lawrence, Burrow, 61, 63, 65 are all projecting for like the exact same amount of points, 20, 20.2, and 20.2, and 30.2, 30.6, and 30.7 on the ceiling. And they're going to be the three highest on the week because they're projecting well. They save you money because in the 6K tier, and they are all projecting for 8, 12, and 15%. Stafford's actually projecting for the most of that group. So that kind of pushes me towards Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow a little bit. But I get why that tier is projecting really well. All three of them have good matchups. They looked good last week, all three of them. And Stafford's looked good all season. He just hasn't put it together for fantasy purposes yet, and he will. I like that whole tier. I don't have an issue. I'd probably play the ownership game and kind of lean into Burrow finding himself again. Only 8% on Burrow right now. I think that's really interesting. And, I'm not worried about like, oh, he finally found it back to, can he do it back-to-back weeks? Look, they're back home. You get a Seattle team that has been, got shredded by Andy Dalton a couple weeks ago. He's thrown the ball over 40 times in 3 of his 5 games this year. And now he looks like himself again. Like, I'm not overthinking this on Burrow. Like, I have no issues going right back there.
Yeah, I saw him run for like 14 yards for a first down in a full sprint. So you do something
Yeah.
like that. That's as much proof as you need to see that the calf issue is most of it has to be behind him because he's not
Yeah.
even limited in any of these practices. He's running for first downs. He was throwing the ball deep. You saw what you want to see out of the Bengals. I have zero problems with Burrow this time around.
Yeah, I would agree. Other than that, you got your punt plays. Josh Dobbs, 52, Gardner Minshew, 5. People are going to play those guys. Baker, a little bit. So, I don't know. They're okay, I guess. Dobbs has been good if you want to take the other side of that game. And Minshew gets a matchup that has been somewhat friendly with Jacksonville. And, he's one of the better backups in the league. He's competent. It's okay. Again, these are the types of plays that I prefer in the smaller field. But if you look at historical optimal lineups now for a good year and a half, like salaries mattered so much on DraftKings and it's been so tight that these guys, if they hit 24, 25 points, are usually optimal. I mean, we freaking Desmond Ridder was optimal last week at 4,900 because he got to 29 points. So like, I don't think I used to be, fully let's eliminate these guys from my pool. And I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah, when it's tough to afford things out there, you gotta go to the dollar store for something. And now I guess we're doing it for quarterbacks. So
Yeah.
how about we make the jump over to receiver? I think I need you to help me with some deals here. I feel like my gut's telling me everyone's expensive this week. Now look at this. Puka Nacua, they reintroduced Cup. We're making him 8,000. Oh, everyone's 8,000 now. You're not getting anybody this week.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
Jesus Christ, the Devontae Smith basic donut after 2 slow weeks, and we're still making you pay up the ass for him and Waddle?
I love it. I actually love that they're keeping Waddle at 76. I can't recommend Devonta against the Jets here, although no ownership if you're playing Hurts, sure. But Waddle at 76 when Tyreek's going to be 20% owned. I talked about the every other week thing. Tyreek's 9,300. Like I sound like a broken record here to play the pivot, but we know Jalen Waddle's an excellent receiver. He out targeted Tyreek Hill this week, and he could have had an even bigger game. Found the end zone. He's still getting his legs a little bit under him from dealing with the injury stuff early season. But like, this seems like a Jalen Waddle week to me. It really seems like a Jalen Waddle week to me. So you know what? There you go. You have it. My men's warehouse pick of the week, Jalen Waddle. I put it in stone. It feels really good. If it doesn't happen this week, I'll start to get a little concerned. I really feel like we're getting a Waddle week one of these weeks, and I appreciate the DraftKings price makers for keeping them expensive because it's keeping the field off. No one's playing them.
Yeah, nobody's going to play him. And just I just want to give you a chalk rationale for playing Devontae Smith. The chalk rationale from a guy who claims he knows fantasy inside and out would say Sauce Gardner's going to be on AJ Brown and Devontae's going to get the better looks throughout the day.
Yeah, which is certainly
That's just
viable. Yeah, that's certainly possible.
let's see who else is on this friendly little
So
list here.
yeah, so Tyreek, Cup, Chase, and Adams are all looking at pretty big ownership at the 8-1, 8-3, 9-9-3 because no one's going to play McCaffrey, and people are going to find value at running back or at least at tight end and receiver and quarterback potentially. That's why everyone's playing that 6K quarterback tier, and so these guys are going to get owned. But you have a lot of pivots. Puka's only going to get 5%. Amon-Ra is looking at 2%. I already mentioned Waddle. Ridley, no one's going to play, and he's coming off, another wide receiver one or back to his wide receiver one ways. So I think you could approach wide receiver in a very interesting way this week for sure.
Yeah, if there's no Zay Jones, I want to hit Ridley almost every single week until people re-fall in love with him because I think he's one of those guys people can re-fall in love with. I mean, it's hard for me to explain how that chunk of weeks happened in the middle right there because he's so good. He gets open all the time. And I would imagine we're going to have a couple of big weeks. And, this is the right opponent. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, Indianapolis, I just wish the Jags weren't coming back from 2 weeks in London. That just this morning we talked about decrusting.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
There might be a decrust process,
100%.
but when you're talking about those cornerbacks on Indianapolis, they're starting bums out there. They've been torched by so many players.
Dude,
and
Hopkins last
Ridley,
week. You called it. I think Hopkins was a great play last week, and he was. I agree with you though. I can't believe the schedule makers didn't give them a bye. It's one thing to go 2 weeks in London, which is absurd to begin with. But how do you not give them a bye the week after those 2 weeks? That's crazy to me. And so I am scared. Crazy. And honestly, I would take the Colts side and a bet from a betting perspective just for that. Like if I'm looking for my micro edges, like there you go. But I do think, 6,700 for Ridley, 71 for ETN, 65 for Lawrence. Like these are all really good prices. Don't know if Zay Jones is going to be back or not. He got hurt again after coming back in this Bills game. But yeah, I can't ignore these guys either. I'd probably just end up around the field while getting a little bit over on Ridley because he's going to be under-owned.
Yeah, let's swing down a little bit, see if maybe we can get a little bit cheaper. I do think Pittman is going to have a good week with Minshew. Minshew has shown a propensity to lock in on him at times. Absolutely.
Yep. I guess we should talk about the Minnesota guys, right? Because no Jefferson. So now you're going to get chalk around Addison and Osborne. Osborne is only 4,400 on DraftKings. He had already been playing pretty much every single snap. Addison's the more talented guy. You're getting a Chicago team here that you could definitely throw on. How are you?
I'm not playing either of them. I'm not playing either of them.
You wouldn't play either of them?
Yes, because either you have the chemistry with someone or you don't, and neither of them have shown that. Yes, when you're talking about tournaments and whatnot, when you're talking about tournaments and things like that, yeah, you could sprinkle them in there. But the only pass catcher I feel comfortable in is Hawkinson. Just I feel like he'll be ultra locked in on Hawkinson.
Why don't we jump over to tight end because I know we have to head out of here soon. So Hawk, I think there's a chance, and he's their most expensive tight end this week, right? Yeah, I think there's a chance that we're getting like one of those 18 target games from TJ Hawkinson. I mean, look what crusty old Logan Thomas did to this team last Thursday night against Chicago. And we saw Hawkinson when Jefferson was playing at the end of last year get his 12, 13, 14 targets. He had 11 targets in week 3. There's a chance. I'm telling you, there's a chance we get like one of those crazy 15 to 20 target games from TJ Hawkinson. I don't know what his ownership looks like. It
sounds like it's your second Men's Warehouse pick of the week.
Yeah, and only 6% owned. Like, yeah, he's great. He's great. I think Hawkinson's an awesome play. Awesome play.
Hey, man, sometimes you got to go to 2 weddings in one weekend, and that's where you're going to be. You just got.
Do you agree with me though? Like, I have a hard time like poking holes in Hawkinson as a play this week.
I don't think that Cousins trusts either of those receivers. I think it's going to be Hawkinson all day as long as he finds himself open and healthy. I know he left that last game for a little bit. I would imagine that he's healthy, but he loves Hawkinson. He's loved Hawkinson ever since they acquired him, and I think he will have one of those massive target days, but you got to pay a pretty penny for him. So
yeah,
that is tough.
So it keeps the ownership down though. So which I like, Any other? We finally had a Goddard game, and the Jets have been susceptible to tight ends. Do you think that could be repeated?
I do, because if a lot of quarterbacks have thrown away from Gardner, and there are two other options. That's the beautiful thing about that side of the ball when it comes to passing. It's always been the two wide receivers and Dallas Goedert, and we hadn't seen Dallas Goedert until last week, and we saw him in a half. He was the zero on that roulette wheel between the two receivers, and this could be another one. I mean, if I had to just casually guess, it's going to be Smith and Goddard who have nice days out of the pass catchers.
All right, last guy here before you give your men's warehouse, and we got to go. And I don't know why I've taken over the hosting role, but I have.
No, I like it. I like it.
Do you buy into Kyle Pitts at all? Because he's 3,500. People are going to play him this week after finally a competent week last week. You get a matchup that doesn't scare you at all with Washington right now. And by the way, I love Drake London this week too. We didn't talk about him, but Washington's been just gashed through the air recently. We saw DJ Moore.
I do. I do buy in the guy because despite how awful he's been, I think he was right up there in terms of air yards in his target. It's like he was stats, getting a few chances to hit big plays every single week. And because of the quarterback play and a couple of other reasons, he wasn't able to connect. If he's able to connect in some of those other games, there is a 9 targets in there, week 3, 11 targets less. So the fact that there's 5 weeks and 2 games with that many targets in it, I don't think you can just disqualify him from your pool. And if he's that cheap, I don't hate it.
Yeah, I do prefer London at only 4,800 at only 5% owned, and how bad they've been against wide receiver ones. And I'm not playing both those guys. But I agree. And I don't believe in Desmond Ridder as a talent at all, but he showed a level of competency last week that he hasn't shown before. So I know they're going to be super run heavy, but the Falcons look like Pitts is going to have some ownership because he's 3,500, but they look like a super strong pivot this week. Bijan and London both, and Pitts to an extent. Strong pivot to a slate that kind of ugly, and not that many people are going to play. So
I guess I'm going to go real ballsy with my men's warehouse pick of the week. And this sounds crazy, but I teased it before. Oh my God, I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson.
Wow.
And I don't know. If not now, never. If not this week, never. It's going to be against the Raiders defense. A.J. Dillon just looked good against the Raiders defense. A.J. Dillon. Whatever you think about Ramondre Stevenson, the consensus was still better about him than A.J. Dillon last week, before last week started. A.J. Dillon had an eclipse like 25 yards or something like that, and he had a great game. And if he can do it, I truly believe Ramondre Stevenson can do it, because you also have the Raiders on a short week, going across the country, playing outdoors in New England. This could be a spot where if the defense holds, he actually gets a ton of work. Zeke will get some work, but I expect Ramondre Stevenson, when Mac Jones is playing his absolute worst, to shoulder much of the burden, have a couple design screens as well. Think he gets into the end zone. Ramondre full crust Stevenson, to this point, is my men's warehouse pick of the week. That's wild.
It takes gumption, but I like it. 5,400 super cheap for what we thought the ceiling was coming into the year. So we get caught down in these small sample sizes. We're only 5 weeks into the year. So yeah, I mean, to me, my concern isn't on the player, even though I am concerned about the efficiency, and more the team. Like, the Patriots are that bad right now. But I agree with you. Like, it can come at any point. So
I wouldn't do it against a team like New Orleans, like they played last week. I wouldn't do it against a team. There are very few teams. If it was Arizona, yeah, I would continue with that. If it's the Raiders, yeah, I would do it. Pretty much there's like 7 teams that I would be cool with using Stevenson against in this spot at home, and they just happen to be playing one of them. So I'm gonna take I like to call that a calculated sniff. That's what I'm gonna do for this week. And
very nice.
Hopefully this week goes pretty well for us. It seems like there's not a lot of dynamic plays outside that group of receivers. It's not like, oh my God, look at this spot, it's going to be wild. Doesn't seem like there are any games like that on the slate this week. Last week had a couple that busted. That Minnesota Chiefs game, the Chiefs they're getting weird, man, like that with this offense. They're getting real
Really.
weird out there. But we've been weird on here since 2000 when I've been scouting Devontae Smith. All right, everyone. I will be back with you next week with Gary for some week 7 breakdown. Hopefully, we're all power sweep winners, all of us, even though there's a grand total of one of them. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube or wherever you listen to this on, your Chalk Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart. I'd be proud if one of you guys is listening to this on iHeart Radio. Let your friends know about it. And Gary, unless there's anything else, that's it for us this week.
I'm good. Good luck.
Good luck, everyone. Take it easy.